Welcome to Rewatch-and-Rank. On this channel, we rewatch older TV shows, provide a summary and opinion on the episode before ranking each episode against each other. Today's episode is One Piece East Blue Saga Syrup Village Arc, episode 17, Completely Infuriated, Kuro vs. Luffy, Final Battle. The episode in a nutshell is just a brief reminder of what happened within this episode. So we open this episode on Luffy continuing to battle Kuro, and he basically goes to do his quick step technique, except Luffy's now able to catch up, and he ends up grabbing him and essentially immobilizes him by wrapping around him, like his limbs around him because he is rubber. And then Kuro's crew starts to cheer for Luffy since they've been attacked by Kuro at this point. Luffy gets angry at them, stretches his head back, scolds them for cheering him on because he doesn't want them to do that. They're still his enemies. And he then basically then uses the momentum of his head snapping back to headbutt Kuro, which knocks him out. Once Kuro has been knocked out, he picks him up, throws him at his crew. The crew get on the boat, panic, and leave the island with Kuro. And then Luffy kind of ends up falling into Nami, who has arrived again with her treasures, and she sits next to him while he lays on the ground, and they share a moment about what he feels is the proper treatment of his comrades, and Nami tells him that he's the exception, not the rule, as Kuro's treatment of his crew is what is typically standard. While that's happening back and forth, we also have the resolution of the fight with Django. We have the vegetable children shoving a shovel up Django's behind, and then we have Zoro at the end of the last episode dropped Usopp and started running towards Django. He runs forward, he cuts a branch, which is what allows Usopp to have a clear shot, and then Usopp shoots with his slingshot an exploding star at Django, who then is knocked out, which leads to him being able to save Kaya and the vegetable children, and then he extracts a promise from them all to not reveal what has happened on that day, to not panic the villagers, let them believe it was a normal day, and let them believe that he had lied. And then once both of the battles are completed, we then get a little bit of a snapshot into the resolution and how everybody is moving on. So we have the crew and Usopp who gather at the slope to say their goodbyes. Or not their goodbyes, but Usopp thanks them and they inform him they wouldn't have done anything if he hadn't if he hadn't fought for his own people himself. And Nami's just happy about her treasure. We then have Usopp going and basically informing our carrot, onion, and bell pepper children that he is going to be leaving the island as he has decided to pursue piracy like his father did before him. And we get some flashbacks to when he first met the vegetable children and them running through the forests of the island playing pirate and going on their childhood adventures. And there is crying and tears, and then Usopp leaves them to return to his own home where he starts to pack everything up. We have the crew who are having dinner at the restaurant in town, which is when Kaya finds them to basically tell them that, her illness, it was due to depression, that after this incident has resolved and she has new determination going forward, and she has a gift for them. We also see all of the villagers kind of waiting for Usopp to run through the village, telling his lie about pirates, which doesn't happen, and they're all kind of confused as they're standing next to their doors with all of their brooms and pans and things that they chased him with. We then have the crew meeting Kaya at the coast, where they are gifted the Going Merry, which is going to be their ship for the next several sagas. And Usopp, meanwhile, basically packs up everything that he owns in his house, gets stuck in the doorway, manages to break free, but then ends up rolling down the hill all the way to the coast, where he then informs Kaya of his decision to want to be a pirate. And at first, he indicates that he wants to go out on his own, but Luffy, Zoro, and Nami, basically on the ship, are saying, "What are you talking about? We're already comrades. We've already fought together. You're part of our crew now. Get on the ship." And Usopp then does so, leaving Kaya behind. And after their goodbyes, Kaya kind of watches the ship go into the distance, and Mary informs her about Usopp's childhood, where we get another flashback to when his mother had passed on, and how the villagers felt that Usopp's lie also contained his hopes that his father would one day come back, which had yet to happen. And Kaya reveals that she would like to now be a doctor in the future. And then the vegetable children, in honor of their friend who has now departed, have decided to carry on his tradition. And we end the episode with them running towards the village, yelling that there are pirates coming. Now that we've been reminded about what happened within the episode, it's now time to rank the episode. As always, we rank our two ranking lists, are mostly objective ranking lists, which is void emotion, but bias and judgment can still apply. And then the personal ranking list, which is the emotional slash opinion take on the episode. All right, so we start with our mostly objective rank values, and I highlighted those I felt applied to this episode. So we first have a single arc supporting character introduction, which was Bankana, which I believe that's how it's pronounced. Honestly, I don't even know if that's how it's pronounced, but it's Usopp's mom, and she's introduced through a flashback, and we see her as she is passing on. Basically, in the origin story of Usopp's Pirates Are Coming lie, we basically see that in the flashback that he runs through the village saying pirates are coming, going to his sick mother to basically try to give her hope that she has to get better because his dad's come back, which of course never ends up happening, and she does pass on. We then have, and that's worth 1 point, and then worth 2 points, we have our single arc main character development, which of course has to do with Kaya. Obviously, Kaya's illness has now been resolved. She is no longer depressed. And we also learn that she now has a goal for her own future, which is that she wants to become a doctor and study towards that path. We then, of course, get our +2 for our resolved battles, Usopp versus Django, and Luffy versus Kuro. Both of those are resolved very early on in the episode. Next, we have 4 points for our multi-arc main character development, which of course has to do with Usopp. We get several different flashbacks into his past. We get his meeting with the vegetable children, and then them playing pirate. We also get the flashback of Mary telling Kaya about the loss of Usopp's mom and his origin story of his run through the town about pirates. We then get another 4 points for our multi-arc main character growth, and this is the introduction of 2 new attacks we haven't seen before. We get Usopp's special attack Exploding Star, which is the version of his slingshot pellet, which is filled with gunpowder, which will explode. hence exploding star. And then we get Luffy's Gamu Gamu um, bell, which is essentially his headbutt attack. And then our last positive note is another 4 points, and that is for the world building element, which is very exciting. They get the Going Merry, their ship, which will be with them all the way through the next, like I said, several arcs, and therefore is very iconic. And it's their first ship that's actually theirs and their official ship, which is a big step in Luffy's pirating career, as that was kind of the last thing he was missing. You know, he's a captain, he now has his crew, he now has his ship. The only thing he's missing now really is the bounty, and that's going to come up in the future, obviously. But that brings us to 17 positive points. And now it's time for the only negative I really felt was in this episode, and that was that there was a failed emotional impact. As I mentioned, bias and judgment can apply, and it is my judgment that we were supposed to feel very sad about, you know, his goodbyes. You know, we were supposed to feel really like he and the vegetable children, they were bawling their eyes out at their farewell. But as an audience member, I was like, they said goodbye. This had to happen. Like, I didn't feel it very strongly, his goodbye. It didn't emotionally get me, and I feel like it was supposed to. Additional to that, obviously, we have his mother passing on, which is supposed to be, a gotcha moment for emotion, which I'll talk more about that in a moment. And then we also had, of course, his goodbyes with Kaya, and Kaya's depression about him leaving and not having wanted him to leave, but putting on a brave face when he left so that he wouldn't be tempted to stay because she didn't want to hold him back from his dreams. And I feel like those were things that you were supposed to feel emotional towards, but I didn't. So for me, they were failures, which minus the 3 points, which brought us to 14 points. I do want to honorably mention, however, that the mother story was almost successful on an emotional impact, but I just can't get over the father's abandonment. And this even adds an extra level. Like, I already thought it was like a really crappy thing to do to like abandon your child, to go gallivant around as a pirate and never even come back and check up on them or anything like that. And the fact that like Usopp was so accepting of that, I was like, what is going on here? I'm not a psychologist, but I feel like there is definitely something going on here. But this mother thing adds a whole other element to that. Like, did his dad decide to abandon his wife and child before or after she got sick? Because if it was after, that just adds a whole other level of crappiness to his abandonment. If it was before, then fair play. He thought he would at least have one solid parent and may not even know that he's been orphaned. But it was that aspect of it that just stopped it from having the same level of meaning. It was very pitiable for Usopp because now he's lost his only remaining parent, because his father may as well be gone given that he has abandoned him completely, and now his mother is passing on. And it was very, very sweet that the run where he yells about pirates coming because he hopes that it's his dad coming back for them and that his mom will be able to get better and that his mom will take them both out to sea with him. That is very sweet, and that is why it almost got me, but I just couldn't get past how shitty the dad was. And that just brought it back to where it's like, honestly, very shitty situation. But it just wasn't successful. But I wanted to honorably mention it because it was just almost there. And, anyways, having said all that I needed to say there, we are officially a 10 out of 10 for this episode. Which brings our arc ranking so far and our mostly objective ranking for this arc to, in first place, this episode, Completely Infuriated, Kuro versus Luffy, Final Battle. Then we have the world's strongest weirdo, Django the Hypnotist, the terrifying duo, Nyambem Brothers versus Zoro, defeat Kuro, Usopp's tear-filled determination, honorable liar, Captain Usopp. Sixth place is revealing the conspiracy, the pirate caretaker, Captain Kuro. Battle, the Black Cat pirate crew, battle on the slope. Luffy's revival, Miss Kaya's life and death confrontation. In ninth, we have Protect Kaya, Usopp Pirate Gang takes action. And that is our list so far. So now for my personal opinion on the episode. Overall, I think it's a good episode. Obviously, there were some negatives, and we'll get those out of the way first because they are relatively minor. But obviously, some of those we talked about in the mostly objective ranking. We talked about the failed emotional impact. We talked about the Usopp's dad and how I can't really get over that, to be able to feel too strongly on some aspects of the episode. And I'm not going to repeat those because obviously we already talked about them. The new negatives that didn't really fit into the chart was obviously, I want to make a special point about the titles. For example, the title of this episode, Completely Infuriated, Kuro vs. Luffy Final Battle. You would expect, based on that title, that most of the episode would have been taken up with some form of battle. But literally, all that happened was that Luffy catches his ankle when he tries to use his, pussyfoot technique to, like, get away or is out of the black attack or whatever it is. Again. And then he basically wraps around him, scolds the crew, and headbutts him. Battle's over. That's all he does. So simple, so short, done within like the first 5 minutes of the episode, and that was when it, even with it going back and forth with Usopp's battle ending. And it's like very disappointing, honestly, because I did feel like I wish the battles had maybe gone at least the first half of the episode and we could have cut out some of the emotional goodbyes that failed in the end anyways at the end of the episode, just as a personal, well, obviously personal um opinion there, but not that bad. As far as positives are concerned, there are quite a few. um Obviously we had the Usopp's shining moment that he finally got after this entire arc that was supposed to be his introduction arc. I've noted in previous episodes, you'll have heard it, how he is a long distance fighter. He uses a slingshot, and yet they had him doing close quarters combat, which he failed miserably at, and it wasn't a good look. It wasn't a great introduction. It was kind of pathetic, if we're being honest, especially because he kept verbally grandstanding and yet physically could not back that up. However, I felt like this episode started to take the steps needed to correct that because obviously he got a shining moment. He was carried by Zoro. Zoro runs forward, cuts the branch out of his way, and his sharp shooting skills finally get to shine. He's able to use his slingshot to defeat Django from a distance, as he is a distance fighter. And it's a pity that it only lasted like a minute. And then we moved on to our smaller, like, slice of life sort of scenes that ended the episode. But I like that he finally got a chance to shine in the category of fighting that he actually would excel at because he is a slingshot user. Obviously, we had some other cute moments, like everybody waiting behind their doors for Usopp to run through town and are kind of surprised when he doesn't, never knowing, because Usopp's chosen to keep it secret, that he's been fighting all night and all morning to try to save them. Obviously, then you have vegetable children wanting to continue that tradition after he leaves, which is super cute. And then you also have some funny moments in those slice of life moments, which of course is, like Luffy after he wins, basically like picking Kuro up by like the collar and tossing him at his crew while his crew flees on the boat all in a panic. And coincidentally, they happen to have left Django behind. So clearly they didn't think much of their vice captain. And then, of course, we had the Usopp packing up his entire house and then getting stuck in the door before he finally manages to get it unstuck because it's gigantic because he packed everything except like the bed and furniture. And then he rolls down the hill through the village all the way to the shore where he gets stopped by Zoro and Luffy sticking up their feet, so basically gets kicked in the face to stop. Hilarious scene. I loved that one. I also enjoyed the vegetable children using the shovel to stop Django from harming Kaya, and just because they're very short, where else were they going to stick it really? But that was that was a fun moment. So there was also then finally the getting of the ship, the Going Merry, which is now their ship going forward, and that just makes it an iconic moment. And oh my goodness, I just realized I filmed these in order and I only do one take, so I'm not going to go back and fix it. But there was an iconic moment. I put it under world building, but really I should have put it under an iconic, memorable moment line, etc. that they got the Going Merry, but either way it wouldn't have changed the score. So will forgive me this time for forgetting it and not putting that on the chart. And I did include it in the world building, so we'll do that. But obviously that needs to be called out because it is such an impactful moment to the series that and something that's obviously far reaching because it goes on for several sagas. It's almost like a whole other character, though it is a ship, not a character. So, like I said, good episode, did have its issues. I decided to give it a 6 out of 10 for its ranking, which then brings our arc rankings so far on our personal ranking to in first place, Battle, the Black Cat Pirate Crew Battle on the Slope. Second, Protect Kaya, Usopp Pirate Gang Take Action. Third, The World's Strongest Weirdo, Django the Hypnotist. Fourth, Completely Infuriated, Kuro vs. Luffy Final Battle, which was this episode. Fifth, The Terrifying Duo, Nyaben Brothers vs. Zoro. Honorable Liar, Captain Usopp. Defeat Kuro, Usopp's tear-filled determination. Luffy's revival, Miss Kaya's life and death confrontation. And then so far in last place, we have Revealing the Conspiracy, The Pirate Caretaker, Captain Kuro. Another thing to point out about all the titles is they are a mouthful. Which now brings us to our saga ranking so far. And on our mostly objective ranking, we have Romance Dawn Arc in first place with 86.67%. The Orangetown Arc in second place with 76%. And then so far, the Syrup Village arc has earned 62 out of a possible score of 100. Then on the personal side, we had the Orangetown arc in first place with 74%, Romance Dawn arc in second place with 66.67%, and so far Syrup Village arc has earned 47 out of a possible 100. Bringing us to our final segment, which is our series ranking so far, where we are going to be ranking each of these sagas against each other. And so far on our East Blue Saga, we have a score of 16 out of 80 on the objective side, and on the personal side, a score of 11 out of 80. With that, we've now rewatched and ranked One Piece East Blue Saga, Syrup Village Arc, Episode 17, Completely Infuriated, Kuro vs. Luffy, Final Battle. Like and subscribe if you'd like to, and I'll see you in the next episode.